And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, we have an extended 2-hour show. We will talk about the last 24 hours of Boris Johnson, what his legacy is. But perhaps even more importantly than that, the Conservatives have been in power for 12 years. Tomorrow it'll become their 4th Prime Minister in 6 years. They're trailing in the polls consistently by double digits. Are the Conservative Party drinking in the last chance saloon? That's the topic I'll debate tonight with a wide range of guests. It should be exciting, hopefully a little bit of fun too. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. The Conservative Party has selected Liz Truss as its new leader, putting her in line to be the next Prime Minister. Ms Truss beat her rival Rishi Sunak by a 57% majority vote of Tory MPs. Queen Elizabeth is scheduled to formally name her as Prime Minister tomorrow. And in a speech following her victory, Liz Truss said it was her honour to be elected and promised to deliver on energy and the NHS.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
Meanwhile, Priti Patel has announced she'll resign as Home Secretary. In a letter to Boris Johnson, she said she was proud to have served in his cabinet and that she would stay in position until a new secretary was appointed by Liz Truss. Ms Patel has said she'll continue to work from the backbenches. Away from politics, dozens of people have been gathering in central London today to protest against the government's decision to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Demonstrators with placards have been chanting, "Refugees are welcome here," outside the Royal Courts of Justice as a hearing challenging the plan continues. The High Court has heard Rwanda is an authoritarian state that tortures and murders those it considers to be opponents. But the Home Office has said the country is both safe and secure. Well, that's as more than 2,000 people crossed the English Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have been intercepted so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. And the two stabbings in a rampage in Canada, the two suspects rather of a stabbing rampage in Canada are still on the run, but police are saying they have enough evidence to charge them with murder. Damien and Miles Sanderson are accused of killing 10 people and injuring 18 others yesterday. Police say they attacked people in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan at 13 separate locations. Some of the victims were targeted, others were at random. A warrant has been issued now for their arrests. Meghan Markle has given a speech at the opening ceremony of the One Young World Summit in Manchester. an event bringing together young leaders from almost 200 countries across the world. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are back in the UK for the first time since the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. And it comes just days after Meghan's interview with a US magazine, where she revealed yet more details on her difficulties of being involved in royal life. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio with GB News. And now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. I'm here for 2 hours with you tonight, an extended special on this momentous moment, not just for the Conservative Party, but perhaps for the country as well. For 12 years, the Conservatives have been in power. 12 years. And tomorrow, we will get the fourth Conservative Prime Minister in 6 years. I mean, you really couldn't make it up. And some of us who want the Conservative Party to actually be Conservative and succeed are really, really pretty angry. Furious that we pumped yet more billions into the NHS for no better delivery. Frankly, almost incensed by an energy policy that leaves us so vulnerable that the lights may go out next February. The size of government has grown. The size of a civil service has grown. The size of our armed forces has fallen. And yet at every election, the Conservatives stand and we're going to take back control of our borders. We'll have a look at what's happening in the Channel. They get elected as Conservatives. They govern as Liberals. It happens time and time again. And when Liz Truss won that contest at lunchtime today, this is one of the things that she said to the audience.
During this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative.
Wow, can you imagine that? A Conservative Prime Minister that will govern as a Conservative? Well, you could knock me down with a feather. I have to say this to you. I know over the last few weeks and months I've been a bit sceptical about Liz Truss. Sceptical because it seems to me she changes her mind on the big topics again and again. But it is in the national interest that she succeeds. And so I am going to give her a fair wind for the next few weeks and months. But I would say three things to Liz Truss. Unless she sorts out the English Channel crisis, and a British Bill of Rights will not do that. She's going to need to grasp the nettle of ECHR, complete Brexit, give us a proper Brexit. She also on energy, all well and good, and we'll be talking to Gerard Lyons later on in the show, who's one of the financial experts helping her and helping us get through this crisis. All well and good capping your energy bill, but if energy bills are still affordable in winter, people will of course use more of it. Supply. If she says, I will make this country energy independent by the next general election. And the third thing I want to see from her, there's a group of people out there, there are 5.5 million of them. They have been completely ignored by governments of all colours for the last quarter of a century and more. They are the people, the men and women that run our small businesses, the men and women that act as sole traders. The only way we can get out of this debt trap that we're in, and goodness me, doesn't the level of sterling on the international exchanges tell you just how bad our debt is? The only way to get out of this is to get out of it through growth. And growth, in my view, does not come from 4 or 5 giant multinationals opening factories in the north of England or elsewhere. It comes from simultaneous hundreds of thousands of transactions. That is what momentum in an economy is all about. This group of people were literally threatened by Rishi Sunak, threatened by him during the pandemic, saying the self-employed in future will have to pay more of a share. I hope and pray that for the first time in 40 years, the Conservative Party understand that actually economic growth comes through those millions of small companies. Now, if not, then I believe the Conservatives are drinking in the last chance saloon. They're double digits behind in the polls already. They are headed, in my opinion, for a 1997-style wipeout at the next election, unless Liz Truss can do those three things, and of course, much more too. Do you agree with me? Are the Conservatives drinking in the last chance saloon? Give me your thoughts, please. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, let's head to Downing Street and meet our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren,
Hello,
good
Nigel.
evening.
Good evening
I have
to
to
you
say,
from Downing Street.
a month ago, people were saying Rishi Sunak's being selfish, he should pack his bags and go home, end the contest. And by the way, it did go on for far too long. But as it turns out, the margin of victory was nothing like the bookmakers or the pundits predicted, was it?
No, indeed. And in fact, actually, of all the Conservatives and leaders elected really since the start of this century, Liz Truss has performed the worst in terms of that popular vote amongst the membership, getting 57% today. That was 9 points below what Boris Johnson did against Jeremy Hunt 3 years ago. There is no doubt that when Rishi Sunak's team talked about the ground campaign and that it was going well, clearly it was. I mean, he obviously will not be happy today that he has lost, but he has not done himself, I think, any damage in the sense that clearly many Conservative members, not even just viewers out there, but members of the Conservative Party, feel a little uneasy about Liz Truss' direction for this country in the weeks and months to come. And I think this is a little bit damaging, Nigel, in the sense that, you know what, Liz Truss hasn't got that personal mandate of a general election win. You have to remember, she only just got in to the final round of the ballot by beating Penny Mordaunt. She hasn't got a rock solid.
Yeah.
Yes, it was an emphatic victory today, but not an overwhelming one from the membership. And I think that could weigh a little bit on her premiership, as I say, in the weeks and months to come.
Yes, I mean, the party has been far from united. It's been going through its own civil war for, well, frankly, most of 2022. So we'll see whether they unite. But Darren, just run us through, please, the sequence of events from now until this time tomorrow.
Well, I think what's really fascinating, first of all, is that already the gears of government have started to move. This new government, yes, Boris Johnson is spending his last night inside Downing Street, but officials have already been meeting today with Liz Truss's staff and team. They are already being brought up to date with where this government is at and what they need to do immediately from tomorrow. We know they've been having discussions about who could be in and out of the cabinet for the last couple of weeks. Priti Patel resigning this evening. She left before she was sacked. But yes, the big moment is tomorrow. So Boris Johnson is going to get up at the crack of dawn because he's going to come out here at 7:30 a.m. and address the nation for the last time as Prime Minister.
Oh.
He is then going to head up to Scotland to meet the Queen, where he will, of course, tender his resignation. Waiting in a room just round the corner will be Liz Truss, who will walk in and say that she has got the authority now to form a new government. She will then head back here to London, and she will again make a speech in Downing Street. Now, the reason this is all happening much earlier than we thought is because the weather is not looking very good for tomorrow. Lots of thunderstorms predicted, so we're not entirely sure whether Liz Truss will make that announcement out here in the street or indeed be forced to do it indoors. And then, Nigel, we're going to get that full cabinet announcement tomorrow evening, and all this, of course, ahead of PMQs on Wednesday and suggestions that we're going to see a pretty significant fiscal event in the first week or two of this premiership, such as the need to particularly get on top of the problems around energy prices and the crisis that people are going to face this autumn and winter.
It's a busy 24 hours, Darren. Thank you for giving us that summary. Wow, 7:30, Boris Johnson will be giving his last speech as Prime Minister. Well, joining me is Lady Victoria Borwick, Boris Johnson's deputy when he was Mayor of London and then Member of Parliament for Kensington. And, you know, we're talking tonight a lot, of course, about what Liz Truss might do, but it is also a moment to reflect on Johnson's premiership. I mean, and you know, you're close to Boris Johnson, you've worked with him. What a terrible waste.
Yes, I personally think that. I mean, if you think back to his days at City Hall, I mean, the first job of the mayor is to promote and invest and bring success to London. And Boris tells the tale of when he arrived at City Hall and looked out of the window and he could see 1 or 2 cranes. And then by the time he left, he'd bought in investment. He talked about all that business that you mentioned earlier, the importance of it. And there were more cranes than he could count. So absolutely, he bought in investment. You know, he builds up people's success and encourages people to be successful. And of course, the next most important thing is to make sure that Londoners feel safe. and he had Kit Malthouse and then Stephen Greenhalgh, you know, and under Kit we significantly brought down crime, particularly youth crime, particularly when you consider what's happening on the streets of London today and even in these last few days. I mean, sadly, as the Deputy Mayor, I often went to some of the young people's funerals. What a waste of life now.
Yeah,
how terrible.
No, I mean, all of that
those
is shocking.
Families.
But in a way, as Mayor of London, he was a cheerleader, he was a salesman, and nobody would doubt that he's very, very good at that.
Absolutely. Fiendishly clever, fiendishly quick-witted.
But isn't history going to say that he turned out to be a very good cheerleader, but not a very good leader when it came to national government?
Well, I disagree, because I think that if he'd had that opportunity, you remember those days after he won, you know, he went around all the parts of the United Kingdom and we all had smiles on our faces. We knew this was a man who's going to bring in investment. Look at the investment he encouraged of the hub by King's Cross, you know, all the medicine technology. You know, he believes in technology and music.
Well, that's all well and good, Victoria. That's all well and good. But actually, levelling up was what was supposed to happen.
That's right.
We haven't seen much evidence of that, have we?
Well, of course, you know, it was not long. Then we had Christmas, and then, of course, we had COVID. But I passionately think that Boris believes in the people, in the power of the people. He wants to energise the economy. And I think that he had an opportunity and he hadn't had COVID, then I think he would have fulfilled those things.
Do you?
I mean, because, you know, he understood what was important to him. Going back to being Mayor of London, looking at transport, improving the whole overground, you know, reopening Brunel's, you know, tunnel. He believes in infrastructure.
Oh, he loves garden bridges and cross-channel bridges.
But, you know, he made the Freedom Pass 24 hours. He increased the number of people.
But in the end, we finished up with 40 to 50% of those new 2019 voters losing confidence in him. I mean, that is a very, very dramatic fall of support out there among, not just in Westminster, not just, you know, backstabbing in Westminster, which the Conservative Party are spectacularly good at, as we all know. But in the end, people didn't believe he was telling the truth.
I think there are many people out there who do think that he was telling the truth. In fact, I think there are many people across the country who are still supporting the mantra that Boris had, which was, you know, deliver on his manifesto promises, unify the country and empower people, believe in the entrepreneurship, believe in the opportunities that business can create. Boris knows very, very clearly about the, you know, you
But
can't...
he didn't cut any EU regulation at all. That was the opportunity to make life easier for business. I get the pandemic was there. I understand that. But surely something could have happened to help everybody from a small market trader to a big insurance house in the City of London. They didn't do it. I mean, not just him, his government didn't do this.
But surely where Boris really showed his mettle was on Ukraine. I mean, even people who don't support him, and by chance I bumped into Rory Stewart the other day on the tube, and, you know, he knows very much how much I enjoyed working for Boris and how I certainly believe that Boris has the passion for this country. And he said, but Boris has done a great job on Ukraine. And I think we all stand with Boris.
We are all paying the price for that, though, aren't we?
We're paying the price, but we're paying the price of what would happen if we lost. I mean, surely, you know, Ukraine, as we now know, is the breadbasket of Europe. We need to help our farmers over here. You know, we've had this problem now about fuel. You talked yourself about the kneel for fuel resistance, you know, independence.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important that we now invest in all the opportunities over here and reopen some of those oil mines and things that we've closed.
Do you think Boris might come back one day?
Well, I hope so, but he may be so successful.
There we are. You see, the Tories in trouble. Well, if you talk about a former leader coming back, you're not making Miss Truss's life very easy, are you?
I think, just like you, Liz has got an absolute opportunity to govern this country. She's been very, very clear in her campaign that she understands the troubles and the issues facing people in a day-to-day life. And I've absolutely no doubt at all that she will spend those next few months fighting for our country.
We're going to find out pretty shortly. Lady Victoria Borwick, thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us those reflections on your time working with Boris Johnson. Well, let's head over to College Green and let's talk to the Member of Parliament for Shrewsbury, Daniel Kaczynski. Daniel, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, Daniel, you were a big supporter of Liz Truss. Were you surprised she didn't win by a bigger margin?
Well, I think she's won two very competent candidates, the former Chancellor and the current Foreign Secretary. It was a very fair, robust contest, and she's won. And whatever margin she's won by, she has actually secured the confidence of the members of the Conservative Party and ultimately the MPs. But one thing I'd like to say to you, Nigel, is that you talked about growth. You said that the only way the Conservative Party stands a chance of holding on to power at the next election is through demonstrating Conservative policies and instigating growth. There is one other thing that we need, though, and that is trade. And thanks to you, and thanks to people like you, now that we have left the European Union, we have, Liz Truss has negotiated 82 bilateral free trade agreements with some of the fastest growing economies in the world. We were told, if you will remember, by the European Union that we were too small, too inconsequential to be able to do these things by ourselves, and that we would need the crutch of the European Union to do this. Isn't it extraordinary? They told us it would take 10 years to negotiate these bilateral free trade agreements. Liz Truss negotiated 84 within 12 months. So when you say what Brexit benefits have there been, the bilateral trade agreements have been won, and some of them, amazingly, Nigel,
Daniel,
like the deal with Japan,
Daniel, I get that.
is better than the one that we had through the European Union.
I get that. The point I've been making, and I will go on making, is we haven't lifted the burden of regulation and red tape off business, particularly small business. Daniel, let me ask you this. You know, fourth Conservative Prime Minister in 6 years, well behind in the polls consistently. Are the Conservative Party drinking in the last chance saloon?
Well, Nigel, as you know, we will be in 2024 potentially asking the British people for a fifth mandate. That's never happened in the history of the United Kingdom. So, of course, the election is going to be extremely tough. And, of course, unity within the party is absolutely essential, because if there is division, if there are public disagreements, then we stand no chance of beating Sir Keir, who will lead a rainbow coalition of left-wing parties and really create economic damage to this country. But let me just say also one thing. Not only has she negotiated the bilateral trade agreements, the work that she has done with her civil servants, and this is all about leadership, is about preparing the work for us to enter the CPTPP, the world's largest trading bloc, 16 of the fastest growing economies in the world. Now, we couldn't have done that if we were members of the European Union. And interestingly, I'm talking to European companies who are actually wanting to invest in the United Kingdom in order to take advantage of the sixth largest economy in the world, but also to enter the CPTPP without any tariffs. So the whole argument of our membership of the European Union is being turned on its head, and I have every confidence in Liz Truss being able to show the steel and metal required to prosperity.
Well, Daniel, you've given a great tribute to Liz Truss's ability to negotiate trade agreements. Let's hope, in terms of our economy, that you're right. Daniel Kaczynski, thank you for joining us here on GB News. In a moment, we'll go north of the border. We'll get a view from the SNP. What do they think about Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister? And there's a very important court case going on. It concerns deportation flights to Rwanda. All will be explained in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
News Channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
So, are the Conservative Party drinking in the last chance saloon, or can Liz Truss turn the whole thing around? Some of your views coming in. Phil says this is their last chance to act like the Conservative Party we need. Somebody on Twitter says they will fail. They are sworn to carry out the UN's globalist agenda. Audrey says, thank goodness it's over. Audrey, I couldn't agree more. It was agony. It seemed to go on absolutely forever. Let's hope they can get back to properly running the country. Well, there are some, Audrey, that question whether that's been the case for the last 12 years. On Twitter, I get, Liz should invest in border force to process asylum seekers more rapidly. Frankly, I'm not sure that would be of any use at all, because if we're signed up, and, you know, we've got the Human Rights Act, which brought the ECHR into British law. I don't think processing would make any difference at all if it's done here in this country. That's why this court case that's going on this week is so important. And Carrie says, the beginning of the torturous end, quite likely. Well, one thing I will say about Liz Truss is she does have perhaps the most difficult in-tray of any Prime Minister since Winston Churchill in 1940. And one of those issues that will be vexing and difficult for her is that of the Union. Yes, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol needs to be dealt with. But what about Scotland? What is going to happen? How will the SNP view Liz Truss as Prime Minister? Well, joining me is Angus MacNeil MP, a member of the SNP, a believer, strong believer in an independent Scotland. Angus, I want to put this to you. The old Etonian, Boris Johnson, did not go down well north of the border, and that's perhaps an underestimate. And I know you yourself felt that Johnson was the best ever recruiting sergeant for the SNP and its aims. You must be actually a bit sad that he's gone.
Well, you said Boris Johnson was the best recruiting sergeant for independence of Scotland. I think the best recruiting corporal or lance corporal for independence of Scotland will be Liz Truss on her job now. So I'm really looking forward to her period of tenure. But you said earlier as well that the Tories were drinking the last chance saloon. Well, in Scotland, they've long left the last chance saloon. The last one in about 1955, and I think it was the 1983 or 87 election. They were talking about the doomsday scenario for the Tories, who are usually hovering about 1 or 2 seats in single digits in Scotland, very low on the opinion poll. So it's long past the last chance saloon for the Conservatives in Scotland.
Well, you're in electoral terms, or in terms of winning seats, you are, of course, absolutely right. They've been hovering at a pretty low number, the odd blip on the upside. I get that. But isn't there something funny going on here? That the SNP have been the utterly dominant party, both in terms of elections to Westminster and, of course, Holyrood as well. And yet, even though your party is so big and so dominant, when it really comes to a referendum, and the Scottish people stare down that barrel, it's not very likely in the next few years that Scotland's going to secede, is it?
Well, I think it is. I mean, in 2014, the SNP and the independent side put on 17%. And I think the next time we have a referendum, we'll put the percentages on again. I think the UK government under Boris Johnson was very scared of asking the Scottish people their opinion on a UK out with the European Union. We have to remember that the European Union was polling at 62% in Scotland. The European Union is more popular in Scotland than the United Kingdom. So we're quite willing to put that to the referendum test and ask the people. It's those in London that are running scared. And I noticed that Liz Truss today got about 45% of the Tory membership. And only yesterday they were talking about having a referendum act for Scotland, which would mean they would need more than 50% of the electorate, whether they voted or not. So by that sort of reckoning, Liz Truss shouldn't be going to Balmoral, Scotland tomorrow to accept the offer of Prime Minister from the Queen, because if it's good enough for Scotland, it should be good enough for Liz Truss as well.
Well, Angus, come on. I mean, they are two very different types of election. I mean, let's be honest about that. I mean, they really, really are. But let me also put this to you. For many, many years...
and reality.
well, they are different. But for many, many years, Alex Salmond, for many, many years, was a very charismatic leader of an energetic leader of the SNP. And one of the main arguments was that Scotland would survive, and would survive well, because of the gas and oil reserves that were there off the Scottish coast. And yet it seems that now Nicola Sturgeon and your party are going hell for leather for a net zero agenda, and that you're not actually very keen now for new oil and gas fields to open in the North Sea. Just quickly, if you would, how would Scotland, separated, how would it pay the bills?
Well, you'd have to ask the same question of Finland, you'd have to ask the same question of Iceland, the same question of Sweden, of Portugal, of everybody else. And you should know, of course, that since 1945 the UK hasn't paid the bills at all. It's been putting on loan and loan and loan, debt and debt and debt, and it's only paid back about 1.7% of all monies borrowed in the last 70 to 80 years. So to ask Scotland how would they pay the bills when the UK hasn't paid its own bills, I find is a bit rich. What we do see round about us is the prosperity of Ireland having left the UK. There's the prosperity of Norway with its oil reserves and doing a lot for the green agenda as well. We're seeing how Iceland's getting on with the population of Dundee, and we're seeing how Scotland's getting on with a government we don't vote for, a government we haven't voted for, a party we haven't voted for since 1955. I've no worries about how Scotland will get on after independence. I just don't think we'll be needing to send too many food parcels south of the border, Nigel.
Angus MacNeil, thank you for coming and joining us. And one day, I'd love you to come into the studio and tell me why Scotland would be better off inside the EU. We'll save that for another time, all right?
Very, very gladly, Nigel, very gladly. I can do it now if you want.
Good, I look forward to it. I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So, a very important court case. Let's cross now to the Royal Courts of Justice and be joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, what is going on there?
Good evening, Nigel. Well, it was a day of protests actually outside the Royal Courts of Justice, with a few hundred people who were very much against the Rwanda policy who were gathered here. There were also some protesters here who are in favour of the Rwanda policy, who want the Channel migration crisis, the small boats crisis, to be brought under control and to be stopped. And as we speak, Nigel, our producer down in Kent, Chris, who I know you know well, is telling us another couple of boats are attempting the crossing this evening, on an evening, of course, where it's been pretty choppy out there in the Channel. Just one boat made it across today, unlike the situation over the weekend where 2,100 plus came across in many small boats. So the need to get clarification from the courts behind us on whether this Rwandan policy is lawful or not has never been more urgent.
No, absolutely, Mark. Well, thank you. And look, and do I understand this case will go on for the whole week? And when can we expect a judgment on it?
Well, this is the thing. I don't think we're going to get a judgment anytime soon, Nigel. This is a 5-day hearing. But there is another related hearing involving a group of asylum seekers that's taking place in October, and then we're told that the process will be that the judges who are hearing this case will then have a reserved judgment. That judgment will be delivered at the time they deliver the judgment for the case in October. So we could be talking into November, maybe even December, and all of the time more boats are crossing the channel, Nigel, and we're getting into the period with just about 1,000 short of where we were for the whole of last year, 28,500 just over. We're fast approaching that now. We've still 4 months to go, and arguably going into actually the busiest period.
Mark White, thank you very much indeed. Well, you may have seen some protesters outside the court there saying, refugees, welcome. I mean, these people believe in total open borders. Let me show you some footage from this weekend of why actually a clear majority are very, very worried about what's going on. And there we are. There's somebody walking along the beach on a Sunday morning, Sandgate in Kent, and there's a dinghy with 50 people arriving on the shingle, and those young men running off. And in the end, of course, they generally, certainly if they're landing during the day, get rounded up. And I mean, when I've used the word like invasion in the past, I'm bitterly criticised for daring to use that word. Well, what does that look like to you? However, we are in a very, very big legal mess. Is there a way out of it? And I say this on the evening that Priti Patel has resigned as Home Secretary, and much as I like her personally, I can't imagine any Home Secretary, almost any minister in history, has overpromised and underdelivered to the extent that Priti Patel did. Well, joining me is legal expert Joshua Rosenberg. Joshua, we've got the bare bones, the outline of this case, and it seems, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to rest on the clauses that exist within the Human Rights Act in British law.
That's certainly part of it, Nigel, and the migrants are relying on Article 3 of the Human Rights Convention. They are saying that if they were sent to Rwanda, they would not be safe. Reza Hussein said this morning in court, representing some of the migrants, we make no bones about our submission that Rwanda is a one-party authoritarian state that doesn't tolerate political opposition. It's a regime that repeatedly imprisons, tortures and murders those it thinks are its political opponents. And it says that those allegations against Rwanda are based not necessarily on what these migrants think, but what the British government thinks, because it's the British government which has said this in the past, and that's one of the reasons why it's bringing this action.
But it seems wherever the government tries to go on this, it's met by objections. It seems that deporting almost anybody anywhere, even to deport people to Albania, which of course is a NATO member, an EU applicant, a holiday destination, even with that we come up against the Modern Slavery Act, which again, incorporates ECHR. I mean, if we were to leave ECHR and amend our own Human Rights Act accordingly and all subsequent legislation, would we be then freer to make our own decisions about who stays in this country and who doesn't?
You're right to say that if the United Kingdom were to withdraw from the Council of Europe, which, as you know, runs the European Convention on Human Rights, then there would be no risk of a decision by the court in Strasbourg against the United Kingdom. But there are other international agreements which the United Kingdom is bound by. So the UK would have to withdraw from all sorts of agreements. There is no doubt that asylum is, as a principle, accepted across the world. It's not an obligation that you can't send somebody to a safe third country. And of course, it's not there's no reason why, if somebody is not a genuine refugee and they've come from Albania, that you can't send them back to Albania. But you're right to say that there are international agreements on the treatment of refugees, which the United Kingdom respects.
Yeah, and I suppose then it really comes down to what the definition of a refugee is, and perhaps the 1951 sort of definition needs a bit of updating.
Yes, and I think the problem is that that was written at a time when people were still fleeing war-torn Europe. And of course, the real question is whether these migrants are genuine refugees or whether they're economic migrants, whether they're simply looking to improve their position, as many people would if they could. Now, you're right to say that Priti Patel has had difficulty with this. One of the problems is the delay in processing these people and establishing whether they are genuine refugees or not. But there is no doubt that there are powers to send migrants to safe countries, and that's not something which the refugees, the migrants, lawyers accept the UK has complied with. And as I say, there is the problem about whether Rwanda will abide by its obligations under international law to treat these people fairly. As for the problem that you raise, that these people, many of them say they've been trafficked. Well, that is domestic legislation, that's UK legislation. And obviously, if they are victims of traffickers, then they need to be treated in a way that respects that.
Joshua Rosenberg, this one, as they say, will run and run. And I thank you for coming on and joining us here at GB News. Just a very quick what the Farage moment. We learnt last week that GPs' pay rose on average about 20% last year. That's despite our anger at not getting GP appointments and in many cases then working fewer hours. This came across my desk. I found it quite extraordinary. GPs are being incentivised to deliver an accelerated autumn COVID booster in care homes. This will be the 5th booster offered to the elderly. And if a GP completes the boost for a care home, he or she will be paid an extra £525 for doing so. Who knew that our GPs earn extra money for delivering COVID jabs? I could start to talk to you about Big Pharma and a whole load of conspiracy theories, but I simply haven't got the time. What I have got time for, though, in a moment, is for Sir Alan Duncan to join me on Talking Pints. Former oil trader, former Conservative Member of Parliament, former minister, and at the time, well, he seemed like a pretty aggressive Remainer to me. In a moment, I'll find out why.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Yes, it's my favourite time of the day again. It's Talking Pints, and I'm joined by, well, I think friend and adversary, Sir Alan Duncan.
That's a fair description.
Very, very
Cheers.
good to see you.
I've been trying to get a pint off you for years.
Well, now, I say friend and adversary because I do remember one time we were doing Question Time, and it was in Yorkshire at an old Bomber Command base. Do you remember this? And the green room was like a sort of rear gunner's room. And there was that game where you put 50p in and you were the rear gunner firing at Messerschmitts and things. I remember you and I playing that game, and the producers of Question Time getting very worried
What's
about
going on here?
where we were and all that. Now, we're supposed to be bitter enemies, but of course we're not. We're civilised human beings.
Exactly.
And that's really important. And I'm really interested, before politics, you know, I was in the commodities business, London Metal Exchange. You were an oil trader.
Yeah.
Did you ever think we'd see a time when we'd start talking across Europe about energy rationing, about maybe even the lights going out?
No, never. You wouldn't have thought that, because when I started oil trading, it was the beginning of the free market in oil. And of course, we've still got it. But I don't think anyone thought that there would be such a sort of strangling of pipelines of gas, which is the main problem we've got at the moment, caused by war on the edge of Europe, which we thought that we'd seen an end to.
We always think that after every war, don't we?
That's the danger, of course. And, you know, wise people who say that, you know, history won't repeat itself need to realise that certain traits and themes never go away, and one of those themes is danger. And you have to have a defence system and be cautious and not just think that you're forever going to be okay.
No,
we're not.
well, I have to say, I think, you know, closing down the Rough gas storage facility on the East Coast was one of the most short-sighted things any British government has ever done.
Well, I think that's right. And I think it shows a very big theme of our politics over the last 25 years, which is something I feel very strongly about, which is politicians do a lot of things for effect, and their policies are ill thought through, and they think short-term, because long-term decisions and long-term planning is not short-term popular.
Because the election's in 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, or you don't think 25 years ahead on storage, infrastructure, even, you know, sort of funding care and pensions and things. We're too short-term.
I do remember this. Tony Blair asked Frank Field to go away and think the unthinkable, and Frank Field did, and Blair promptly sacked him. I mean,
exactly.
Sorry.
You're allowed to think it, you're not allowed to say it.
And were you one of those people who sort of had made his money before going into politics?
Not as much as some people think, but enough and a bit. But I think the more important than the money is what, for me, was geopolitical experience. When I'd lived abroad as a youngster, because my father was in the RAF, I lived abroad. I went to America for a bit as a university. And I just think that international experience and that feeling of other countries' attitudes and things is something that's been lost. And of course, I mean, I think I'm right in saying that Boris Johnson's first cabinet was the first cabinet in British political history when no one was over 60. And so, and then Nadine Dorries came in, she was a bit older. And so, you know, where is the experience? It's not that you have to have age to have wisdom, but without some age, you're probably missing a lot of wisdom.
I say, you say age, but life experience.
Life experience
is actually pretty important.
I think so.
You know, I mean, 92 you first went to the Commons.
Yeah.
You've seen the House of Commons change incredibly during those years. I mean, the number of people who now come straight from uni through a research office into the Commons doesn't make it a better place, does it?
I think there's a real lack of lifetime experience. It is a lot younger. And I think there's also been another phenomenon which plays into that, which is that government is very much influenced by special advisors. So in all my time as a minister, it just felt that special advisors had more power, more access and more influence than ministers. And again, I don't think any Prime Minister in the last 15, 20 years has sat down with all of the health ministers, all of the treasury ministers. You know, if you're a CEO, you sit down with a finance team, you sit down with a marketing team. This doesn't happen in government.
Amazing.
So they never sit down with the ministers about their job, and they're the ones who are supposed to be running the country.
No,
I mean,
I used to tease the European Parliament. You've never done a proper job in your lives. God, they hated it. But we'll come back to Europe in a minute. So a long time in the House of Commons.
27 years, yeah.
And you look back on that. On balance, was it worth doing?
Yeah, it's been costly. I mean, I think I gave up a lot. But you know what? I wouldn't have done anything else. And if, I could have made a lot of money instead, but then I'd been frustrated that I hadn't done this. So there's no point in pretending that it wasn't the right thing.
And a lovely constituency.
Fantastic constituency. Rutland, a little county. As William Hague said, it's amazing that the smallest member represents the smallest county.
And Rutland, of course, famously got its own independence from Leicestershire, didn't it?
We got it back in 1996.
Yes.
Peter Walker and Ted Heath having taken it away in 1972 or 3.
Yeah.
So it's a very proud county with its own unitary authority, and it's home, and I love it. But in addition to having what I've always regarded as the best constituency, I had 2 fascinating ministerial jobs. I mean, I don't give a damn. I was never in the cabinet, but I was Minister of International Development during the Arab Spring and all that kind of stuff. I was Foreign Minister, not only a deputy to Boris, but also during all the Brexit stuff.
Yeah, we're coming to that.
You're coming to that, I bet you are. But also, dealing with Argentina and opening up, Central Asia like Uzbekistan. I mean, I really loved it.
I had a fascinating time.
And that's the only thing I miss, actually.
Right back to university, when you were a Liberal, when the Liberal Party was arguably quite liberal, which is now pretty illiberal, in my view. But you believe in small government, you believe in the individual being able to live their lives. You are a libertarian.
Yeah, I wasn't a member of the Liberal Party.
OK, but you were a Liberal.
I was when I was about 12.
OK.
As I keep on
rather
saying,
like Liz Truss.
Yeah, as I say, I grew out of it.
But you've always believed in that. You believe in the individual, you believe in free markets, you believe in enterprise, you're socially incredibly relaxed about the world, and you hate authoritarianism and big government. I can't work out, Alan Duncan, why you were a Remainer. Surely the European Union, the monolith in Brussels, the unelected bureaucracy running Europe, surely you should have been against that.
No, I get that, I was very much on the edge.
I don't know about that. You were pretty angry about it all. I mean,
well, I became so because I became very worried about, actually, as a free marketeer, the loss of absolute, total, easy free market access. And I think that has cost us a bit, because we haven't got that in the way. We now have tariffs and things like that.
We don't have tariffs as such, but we have...
Yeah, we have blockages, let's call it.
It's easy to trade with the rest of the world, but it's harder to trade with Europe, of course. That's true.
Which is, I think, our closest and biggest market. So I think that's been a negative. You're totally right about the fact that, and I got angry about this too, that having been a good economic concept with a layer of political cooperation, it became a European government. Yeah. And I totally agree with you on that. It's quite power light. I actually voted to leave. It's the first vote I ever cast in my life in the 1975 referendum.
Yeah, I know.
And then I voted to remain because I was worried about the longer-term consequences of international disruption because we become so interdependent. And I also thought that a lot of the regulations and things which people blame on Europe were actually made 10 times worse by us, because we gold-plated, we turned a recommendation or instruction from Europe.
That may well be true.
Into very, very detailed law, which was bossy.
But I saw you the morning after the referendum on College Green. You were not a happy bunny, were you?
No, because I thought it was going to... First of all, I thought it was very divisive of the country. I don't believe in referendums altogether.
How dare the little peasantry have their say? Is that what you mean?
No, not little peasantry at all. Quite the opposite.
So if we'd left it to the MPs, we'd never have left the European Union, and yet the country wanted to. Isn't that an argument for direct democracy?
They just wanted... Yeah, there are arguments for direct democracy, but I worry about referenda because I think they sit ill with a parliamentary thing. I think there was one very, very big mistake, which is that the results were allowed to be broken down into a constituency. If you're going to have a national referendum, you should have one national result.
And that would have made life a lot more harmonious, wouldn't it?
I think it would, because I think that that saying this constituency would remain, this constituency would leave, when it was all on a knife edge anyway, and, you know, some had the majorities, of course, but others were very, very evenly split, was and remains massively divisive. And I think that was a mistake.
Are you over it?
Oh, totally. I was over it the next day in the sense that I think, I had my view.
Not what I saw.
I was over it in the sense of accepting it, not necessarily being happy with it.
Were you really angry that morning because you felt Boris hadn't been quite straight with people?
I think...
And you have an antipathy towards Boris, don't you?
No, funny enough, I've always made this very clear. And, you know, ever since I left the Foreign Office, I've never said a word against Boris. I found him exasperating. That's the issue. It's not that I didn't like him. I mean, I said to him, Boris, the trouble with you is you are impossible to dislike, but sometimes you're very difficult to respect because can't I make you serious? And what do you mean I'm not serious? I said, well, look in the mirror. That, you see, he's got a brilliant mind. But he's also got a rather untidy mind. And my lament, you know, my book is a sort of a lament about the decline of our standing in the world and the standards in Parliament, was that Boris didn't apply himself to the job of Prime Minister once he'd got there. And I actually think that no other leader I've worked with could have been as effective in the pandemic as him. Because it needed his character to galvanise public opinion in this unique once-in-a-century episode, and he did that. I actually think that he would be brilliant in doing the same for our economic plight now, had he not, sadly,
he's blown
it, shot himself in the foot. So my opinions about him are not those of disapproval and dislike. They are those of upset and exasperation.
And let's see what Liz Truss does. And
she might yet surprise us, I think. We'll see. We have to hope so.
On that optimistic note, I'll say thank you for joining me on Talking Pints.
Cheers, Nigel. Cheers.
OK, it's time for Barrage the Farage. Let's see what you've got for me today. Karen asks, the job for Home Secretary is available. Fancy applying? Well, Alan, I think Alan's done with politics now, aren't you?
I'd give that one a miss, that's for sure.
I'd love to do it. We'd be out of ECHR, a proper Brexit would be delivered, border controls would be back, we would tow the boat straight back to France, the French would go bonkers, but we'd sort the problem out, just as Tony Abbott did in Australia. Next one. Robert says, Priti Patel talked the talk but could not walk the walk. She was likeable but very ineffective as Home Secretary. Do you agree? She promised the earth, didn't she, time and again, Priti Patel?
Well, it was all about sort of muscular press releases, not about practical policy. I mean, where do all these rubber boats come from? You know, you should be able to track and trace them in the market before they leave the French coast.
They're manufactured in Turkey, mostly, I think is the answer.
But they've got to get to France in the first place.
Yeah, well, they're in the back of vans, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And particularly with Schengen, in your beloved European Union, where, of course...
You are a mischievous one.
I couldn't resist
You can't resist
it. No, I couldn't. Robbie says, is Liz Truss taking over a poison chalice? I speculated earlier, Alan, that maybe it's the toughest in tray of anyone since Churchill in 1940, just given the breadth of it.
Definitely. With very little time to prepare. I mean, I think we've got two massive crises following each other in succession, the pandemic and the Ukraine conflict, which has increased all commodity prices and hence inflation. And, you know, it's going to be very, very difficult because it puts massive pressure on our public finances.
It's going to be very, very tough. We have to grow our way out. And those 5.5 million men and women running small businesses will be the key to much of it. In a moment, we will have the 8 o'clock news. And I'm going to stay with you for a further hour. We've got a big, broad range of guests, including Gerard Lyons, who might give us a clue as to what Liz Truss's economic policy is really going to be.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Truss defeats Sunak, we'll bring you the sharpest political analysis live from Westminster. I'll be joined by Higher Education Minister Andrea Jenkins, who made headlines for facing down anti-Boris protesters, as she reveals why Truss will need to be just as robust to defeat the rabid Tory-hating opposition. Plus, the Conservative media's leading ladies Madeline Grant and Olivia Utley analyse the challenges facing the new PM. and I'll break down a huge day in British politics with my superstar panel. The Daily Telegraph's Christopher Hope, the iNewspaper's Benjamin Butterworth, and the former MEP and political commentator Belinda DeLucy. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
We will in a moment discuss Boris Johnson's legacy with two of his biographers. We'll also talk about Liz Truss. What is the big economic plan going to be? Before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. The Conservative Party has selected Liz Truss as its new leader, meaning she will become the UK's next Prime Minister. Ms Truss beat her rival Rishi Sunak by a 57% majority vote of Tory MPs. Her Majesty the Queen is scheduled to formally appoint her as Prime Minister tomorrow. In a speech following her victory, Liz Truss said it was an honour to be elected and she promised to deliver on energy and the NHS.
It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
Well, Priti Patel has announced she's going to resign as Home Secretary. In a letter to Boris Johnson, she said she was proud to have served in his cabinet and that she would stay in position until a new Home Secretary was appointed by Liz Truss. Ms Patel said she'll continue to work from the backbenches. Away from politics, dozens of people have gathered in central London today in protest against the government's decision to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Demonstrators with placards have been chanting, "Refugees are welcome here," outside the Royal Courts of Justice. That, as a hearing challenging the plan continues inside. The High Court heard Rwanda was an authoritarian state that tortured and murdered those it considered to be its opponents. The Home Office said it was a safe and secure country. Well, that happens as more than 2,000 people crossed the English Channel over the weekend. GB News analysis of the data shows almost 27,500 people have been intercepted so far this year. That's just short of the 28,500 people who made the journey over the whole of last year. And in Canada, the suspects in a stabbing rampage in the country are still on the run, but police say the two of them they have enough evidence on the two of them to charge them both with murder. Damien and Miles Sanderson are accused of killing 10 people and injuring 18 others yesterday. Police say they attacked people in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan at 13 separate locations. Some of the victims were targeted, others were attacked at random. A warrant has now been issued for their arrests. Meghan Markle is delivering a keynote speech in Manchester for the first time since quitting as a senior working royal. Her speech will focus on gender equality at the One Young World Summit, an event bringing together 2,000 young leaders from almost 200 countries. She's joined by her husband, Prince Harry, as well as stars including former Boomtown Rats frontman Sir Bob Geldof. This speech is just days after Meghan's interview with the US magazine The Cut, where she revealed more details on her difficulties with royal life. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News Tonight, where it's time for part 2 of Farage.
Yes, you've got one more hour of me, another hour of analysis with a great range of guests. We'll be debating Boris's legacy with two of his biographers, amongst other things. But if you really think about it, the Conservative Party this year have been very, very selfish because it's all been about them. Endless. Will Boris stay? Will Boris go? How many letters has Sir Graham Brady got or hasn't he got? And then this contest, which seems to have dragged out forever and ever and ever. And I have to say, it seems to me, that if Liz Truss only gets 57% of the vote, which, by the way, is the lowest number any Tory leader has got ever since this process of allowing party members to vote in 1998 was put in place, what hope is there of Tory unity? Now, one man who is in politics because of what he believes in, I think, a bit more than climbing the greasy pole of the ministerial ladder. But goodness me, he can be an absolute pain in the neck to successive Conservative leaders. And he's a Buckinghamshire Member of Parliament called Steve Baker.
Thanks for the introduction, Nigel.
Well, I think it's pretty fair.
It is, yeah.
I first met you not long after you'd been elected to Parliament, and I was very struck that you actually believed in stuff.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
You know, and Europe, you and I were very much on the same page on that. So you're a conviction politician.
I'm afraid so, yes. I believe in the good old ideas of classical liberalism, which these days are known as conservatism. I believe in freedom under the rule of law, and that's why I am so pleased that Liz Truss is to be our Prime Minister.
I'll come to Liz Truss in a moment, but forgive me to just indulge for a second about Steve Baker's career in politics.
Oh dear.
No, well, it is interesting because you believe in stuff and because you believe in classical liberalism, we have had, since 2010, this will, as of tomorrow, be our fourth Conservative Prime Minister. 4 in 6 years it'll be. We have seen a Conservative Party that gets elected looking like it's Conservative, governing as something very unconservative. The state has got bigger, our energy policy is a catastrophe, the more money we throw at the NHS, the worse the delivery is. And I know that you agree with all of these things. And that's why you've been a serial rebel. You've been a serial rebel because they haven't actually governed in the way that they presented themselves to the electorate. Am I being unfair?
Well, I haven't been a scattergun rebel, but it's true that I've led...
Serial, I said.
Serial, it's true that if you take Brexit, COVID, energy policy, it's true, of course it is, that I've organised big rebellions on all three. And at the moment, if I may say so, it looks like I've been proven right, along with you on Brexit, about all three issues. But it doesn't do a bit of good, really, to be trying to govern the country from the backbenches through rebellion. So people asked me back in 2015, will we have a Corn Laws-style split in the Tory party? And I said no, and I was proven right. You know, look at it. Boris Johnson came to power. We won a big majority. We left the European Union. Now, the truth is, real politics, winning a majority in the House of Commons, super tough. You know how tough politics can be. We're under attack all the time. We've somehow got...
I know better
than
most.
You absolutely do. I certainly respect that you've been under more attack than I have, and I've been under a lot. But What I would say is that forming an electoral coalition capable of governing this country is tough stuff. And Conservative MPs today face a real choice. Are we going to take seriously our duty to the public to govern well, or are we going to, as you pointed out, keep talking to ourselves? And the answer to me is obvious. We've got to knuckle down and take the lead.
Are you drinking in the Last Chance Saloon electorally as a party?
Well, we might be, because there's no real getting away from it. We face a series of really serious crises, mostly global, it has to be said. You know, the European Union in some cases is worse than us. PMI indexes on the economy, energy prices are as bad there.
But much of what's happened here is self-inflicted.
It is absolutely the case. We've been in power for 12 years,
yes,
and we are going to need to earn the public's trust to win the next general election by changing course now. That's, of course, why I launched Conservative Way Forward. But we've somehow got to make the ideas of conservatism attractive. We can't be belligerent advocates of freedom, belligerent advocates of lower taxes. We've got to somehow explain, as I think Liz has, that we want a bigger pie so that we've got more, not only to invest and grow the economy so everyone can have higher wages, but more to give to those most in need. Because if you represent a place like Wickham, as I do, my goodness, there is a lot of need. And I want a bigger economy, I want higher wages, and I want more to deal with social care, and not just elderly people, younger people, working age, sometimes children.
By the way, I get what Liz has been saying. I understand it. You know, it is, well, I have to say, for someone like me, I mean, of course, you know, I'll believe it when I see it, because I've seen promises before that have been broken, but it is, some of it, actually quite exciting. And we've got Gerard Lyons coming in a minute, who's part of our advisory team, and hopefully we'll find out a little bit more. But here's the odd thing. You know, Kwasi Kwarteng, who by this time tomorrow may well be Chancellor of the Exchequer, you know, he and Liz are attacking Treasury orthodoxy. And actually the war of words, the war of ideologies between the two candidates has been considerable over the course of the last couple of months.
Well, do you not think they've been more about tactics and timing? I mean, if you look at the Labour Party, there are still people who want to nationalise the means of production
I don't
there.
care for the minute, I don't care about Labour.
I'm just making the contrast that I think in the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss basically want to go in the same direction of freedom. What they had is a disagreement about timing and tactics and how you get there and what you need to do first. Well, but if you ask Rishi, do you believe in low taxes, of course he says yes.
Oh, yeah, well, Boris Johnson said that and they kept putting him up.
Well, exactly. So
I mean, Rishi is a globalist. Right? He's a Goldman Sachs globalist, and we know that in many, many ways. We're hoping Liz Truss will be different. Well, can the party, Steve, can the party unite?
Yes. And I would say yes from experience. But this, of course, by the way, to your point, this is, of course, why I back Liz Truss for a change, for something different. She, like me, is a true believer in freedom under the rule of law.
Is she?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you absolutely certain?
Well, absolutely. Look at what Mark Littlewood said. The two of them were on the Libertarian wing of the Liberal Democrat Party.
Yeah.
And she is a Conservative like me because she believes in freedom. Look, the reality, I believe, is that the Conservative Party encapsulates the full spectrum of useful political debate between the merely Conservative, trying to preserve the institutions that we have for their own sake, and the classically Liberal, trying to get progress through freedom. And this is why so much debate takes place within the Tory Party. Classical Liberals like me versus my great friend, say, Robert Buckland, who's much more, as it were, Conservative Tory. And then along come the Liberal Democrats being useless and the Labour Party not being able to make their mind up whether they're communists or social democrats. The crazy thing is, and to your point earlier, we've spent a dozen years basically accepting the post-Blair social democratic consensus.
Absolutely.
And that's what's failing. Now, this is something that your viewers, I hope, will get really clear in their minds and say to their friends, do we think that this crisis emerges because government spent too little? Because government taxed too little, because it regulated too little, because it borrowed too little, ran too many surpluses, because interest rates were too high, debt's too low. I mean, do they really think that? Because to ask those questions is to answer them. This is a massive crisis of big government everywhere.
I agree.
And the truth is, for 100 years,
Steve, I agree.
everywhere we've been going for big government.
And if Liz Truss starts to reverse that, you know, I will cheer to the rafters, and I genuinely will.
Yeah.
You know, I want us to succeed in the national interest. But I've been let down too often by Conservative leaders saying one thing to get elected and then doing different.
I have to say, Nigel, this is where I think, if I may, that you and I have quite often, we've had a lot in common, but we've quite often differed. If I were to take you to some of the areas of my constituency where people will resolutely vote Conservative, because they want free markets, they want lower taxes. But they are very internationalist and pro-EU. I mean, I lost 2,000 votes at the last election over Brexit and my stance on it, and my particularly strident stance, indeed some of the mistakes I made. But we have got to get those people to vote Conservative. Now, this, I think, is the tricky thing. We're not trying to please Nigel Farage. We're trying to get Conservative MPs elected.
Yeah, well, I can promise you there are a lot of people think like Nigel Farage.
Of course there are, we know that.
And there's millions of them. Final thought, Steve. How long will it be before you rebel against Liz Truss?
I am not going to. It's over for me, rebelling. Absolutely. I am done with rebelling. Look at it. In all human history, has anyone wielded as much power in rebellion as me through technology? I don't think so, because I've sat there with WhatsApp broadcast lists of 130 MPs, and sometimes, 70, 80 have gone the way I asked them to. And it's outrageous, really, and wrong that a single individual backbencher should be able to influence...
No, it isn't.
Well, the thing is this. I accept...
No, it isn't. If we believe in democracy and free speech and open debate, it's not.
I'm grateful you're defending my record,
you
but the
are
point
too.
is...
You're too much of an individual to say you'll never rebel again. It's baloney, isn't it?
We cannot continue, as I have done, trying to steer the life of this country through backbench rebellions.
Well,
we've got to unite behind a Prime Minister.
I have to say, Steve Baker, delight to have you in the studio. I don't believe a word of it, because you're never going to give up your principles and the things you believe in.
Well, I was a minister before, and when I was a minister for that year, I swallowed the collective responsibility and did my duty.
And look how well
that was
did
only
you.
because we got betrayed, as you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be hearing more from Steve Baker over the course of the next couple of years because he's a conviction politician and he won't be able to help himself. Now, we've had an SNP view of what a Liz Truss premiership may look like. Let's find out, live from College Green, what a Labour Member of Parliament makes of it. I'm joined now by Graham Stringer, Labour Member of Parliament for Blackley and Broughton. Graham, Boris Johnson, in the last year or so, was constantly scandal-ridden. There were many people doubting his integrity in terms of his ability to tell the truth, and particularly in what we now know as the Red Wall, something like 40 to 50% of those 2019 Conservative new voters, many of them ex-Labour, had lost confidence in him. I mean, in some ways, might it have been better for the Labour Party and better for Keir Starmer if Boris had stayed in post?
Yes, is a simple answer. And I think what a section of the Conservative Party wanted to persuade us for, and other Conservative MPs made sure it didn't happen, was that we continued with a serial liar and essentially dishonest man as Prime Minister. That's bad for the country. It may have been good in the short term for the Labour Party, as you suggest, but I don't want to be a Member of Parliament in a country that has somebody who can't tell the truth as Prime Minister. Can I just comment on your discussion with Steve? Like you, I have an enormous amount of respect for Steve. We've often been through the lobby together on Europe, on COVID, on a number of issues. What Steve is asking you to believe and the rest of us to do, we have won those arguments. The government have wasted billions on COVID. They've allowed the Bank of England to spend a fortune increasing the inflationary rate of capital assets. And he's saying, as he's been right, and Liz Truss has sat round the cabinet table voting for those policies that we've objected to, often on the same basis of freedom of the individual and rights and stopping ludicrous expenditure. He thinks that she is going to make a good Prime Minister. I spend my life trying to persuade people of my views, whether it's to leave the EU or to vote Labour or whatever. And I'm pleased when they do. But I don't really trust senior politicians like Liz Truss, who campaigns ardently and toughly to remain, and suddenly, because it's to her immediate political advantage to be a leaver, to shift to leave.
Well, Graham, I'm with you, on that suspicion. However, adult human beings are capable of changing their mind, and it can be genuine. So I'm sort of, for the moment, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. But she's, Wednesday is going to be the first clash at Prime Minister's questions, and we can't get away from it. Leadership, television, celebrity, these are very important elements now of how people vote in a system that's become almost increasingly presidential. How do you think Keir Starmer is going to fare against Liz Truss?
I think he'll do well. I mean, he found Boris Johnson very difficult because Boris just told jokes, and that might sound silly, but actually within the Commons chamber, with a loud voice and good delivery, telling jokes can be very effective, even if it misses the point. I think Liz Truss is not a good debater, she's not a good speaker, and I think Keir Starmer, he's not the most exciting speaker either, but he does have an analytical mind, and he can be quite sharp. So I think he will do quite well against the new Prime Minister.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating 48 hours. Graham Stringer, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. In a moment, we'll get back to economics. It's the economy, stupid, is what Bill Clinton said, and certainly in the UK today, it is the economy, stupid. And we'll be joined by Dr. Gerard Lyons, and we'll talk about Trussonomics. What does it really mean?
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
OK, let's do economics. Let's do economics with somebody who I think may have quite a lot of influence as to what's been going on during the course of this campaign. Now, of course, you'll see Patrick Minford. He's all over the telly, and people will say, well, of course, he was one of Thatcher's advisors, and he's very controversial and very outspoken. But Dr. Gerard Lyons from NetWealth has been involved with the Truss campaign, advising and indeed writing in the Sunday newspapers about one or two of the ideas that I suspect we're going to see over the course of the next week or so. Now, the term Trussonomics has been born, and I don't know, Gerard, how much responsibility you would claim for Trussonomics, but you are certainly, when it comes to the energy crisis, making one or two big recommendations.
Well, first, it's great to be on the show again.
Thank you.
I'm not formally part of
I know,
the Truss
but
team.
you're involved.
But yeah, on the energy crisis, what I think Truss Economics will do is that it's going to address head-on the immediate challenges. So I would expect very soon a policy to be announced on the energy side. I'm not privy to the final detail of what's going to be announced, but I think we've moved from allowing prices to keep rising to now deciding to actually set a cap. because prices are already so high that people and firms have already started to adjust their behaviour. And now prices are so dislocated.
So industrial production being cut back because of energy prices?
Yes. So basically what will happen, in my view, is the government will now take on the risk. It will take on the risk above a certain price. I don't know what level that price will be. Of course, we could go down a different route, but this is my perception. This is where I guess things will go, educated guess. And I think above that level, instead of you and I, people or businesses taking the risk, the government will do it. That will at least provide certainty. There will be a cost to be borne, but it's a very manageable cost. But it also leads on to what I think is the crux of Truss economics, as you call it, which is turning on its head the failed orthodox opinion that dominates around here, particularly since 2008. Across Whitehall and Westminster, the view has been that Britain, like Western Europe, is a slow growth economy. That means more of the budget deficit is structural. And what that means is that a decade ago, the Treasury argued wrongly, in my view, for austerity. And in the last 2 years, they argued wrongly for tax increases. The politics might sound different, austerity and tax increases, but the underlying failed economic thinking has been the same. Truss is going to turn it on its head. Monetary policy finally is going to keep inflation in check. The Bank of England is going to have to be on its game. It's going to still have independence of monetary policy. The Bank of England has to get inflation down. And Truss, through fiscal policy will stabilise the economy. And it's a pro-growth agenda, and it should make us positive.
So basically, you cut taxes, you perhaps cut indirect taxes too in the form of VAT, you put more money in people's pockets, and that staves off a deep recession. Is that the basic thinking?
Yeah, no, that's part of it, but there's more to it. The supply side agenda is key. But in terms of fiscal policy, let's be quite clear. We are the only country in the G7 to actually be raising taxes into a global downturn. If we allowed that crazy policy to continue, we would have a deep recession. We're lucky at the moment that the employment situation is really good. Truss, by taking the policy head on, will hopefully prevent a recession, or at the very least, it will be a mild, short-lived recession.
But for 8 years, she's gone along with this Treasury
orthodoxy. Well, no, actually, let's be... Well, OK, I don't know about the politics of it, but what I was encouraged by was that when the national insurance tax increase was announced wrongly by Sunak, she was the first cabinet minister, and apparently there are only 3 at the time, who said this is wrong. I first came in touch with Truss back in 2011, and I think it's relevant for this. I was then heading up research, chief economist, head of research at Standard Chartered. I read a couple of pamphlets produced by these guys in Westminster. One was called Britannia Unchanged, and I asked my team, find out who wrote this bit and this bit. And they came back, well, that bit and that bit were 2 different documents, were both written by Truss. I thought, wow, finally a politician who actually says, let's address the problems, let's actually reposition Britain in the global economy. And actually, what was interesting today, at the acceptance speech, she said, I would want to be elected as a Conservative, but I actually want to rule as a Conservative.
I showed that clip at the top of the programme.
Okay.
I thought, wow, for the first time in 12 years, somebody might actually be Conservative.
Yeah.
Now, I know in the past you advised Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. Are you looking
when he was Mayor?
When he was good,
yeah.
When he was good. Are you looking for a role in this government, Gerard?
I'd be happy to advise, but I think the important thing is that the advice from the outside can help influence things. I think what they need, in my view, is people in Downing Street who actually take on the Treasury orthodoxy.
Well, this is my last question to you. From what you know of Liz Truss, to carry out this agenda, comparisons with Thatcherism are ridiculous, because that's over 40 years ago.
Yeah, of course.
But to carry out this agenda, she's going to have to take on the establishment.
Yeah.
Do you think she's got the strength of character to do this?
Yeah, the challenges facing us are not unique to Britain. They're facing all of Western Europe. But in answer to your question, yes, I think it's not just what she says, I think it's what she's going to do as well. And I think she's going to hit the ground running, both in, well, not just both, but in terms of the energy crisis, redirecting the Bank of England to say, just you do your job properly, we're not interfering, it's over to you guys. And actually, very importantly, on the economic policy, it's basically fiscal policy where you reduce debt to GDP over time. Borrowing is an option. is not a constraint, and it's empowering people and firms. It's all the I's: investment, innovation, infrastructure, and very much incentives. Incentives to reduce taxes, get smart regulation, and that will reduce the other I, it will reduce inequality. So I'm very positive, but of course, we know that she is inheriting probably the most difficult situation. But if you actually, my feeling is if you wanted anyone to do it, she's the person.
I so hope you're right, Gerard Lyons. I really do. And I know, isn't it wonderful to actually have an economist that comes on the show and says we might actually come out of this okay. It won't be easy. But I thank you very much, Gerard, for your contribution. That was, that was really very, very interesting. Now, have any of you driven down the M4 lately? It's just one little example of what I see. I talked about it earlier. 12 years of Conservative government. Yes, the Conservative government that want to get big government off your backs and you to be free and live in liberty and democracy and freedom. If you drive from Heathrow Airport to Reading, don't look at the road, don't look at the other traffic, don't worry about all that. Just look at the speedo. Just look at the speedo and be aware that smart motorways don't just get rid of the safety lane at the side, don't get rid of the hard shoulder and make life very dangerous if you, of course, break down. But you are monitored. It feels like being in communist China. And despite the fact it can be 6 o'clock in the morning, and there's almost nothing on the road, it goes from 60 to 50 and back to 60, and there are cameras everywhere. Well, a big double-page spread in today's Daily Mail, and it's not the first, but it was important, tells us there are now something like 6 million CCTV cameras across the country. They're everywhere, and many of them are manufactured in, well, you've guessed it, China. Now, I thought one of the reasons that we got Huawei, finally, after Boris got a good kicking over it, one of the reasons we got Huawei to be out of our telecom system is we're fearful of what they might be able to do. Security expert Will Geddes. Will, thank you for coming on again. So we are, everywhere we go, we are surveilled. These new cameras can tell our age, our gender, although that's a difficult one these days, I know, but they can. And everywhere we go, it feels, I mean, now in much of London, it's 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
You know, a friend of mine got done doing 26 the other day. I mean, it wasn't school time, it was, you know, late at night. And we're told it's all for our own good.
I think George Orwell might be quaking a wee bit in his boots to see where we've come.
Are we safer with any of this stuff?
Well, to a certain extent, Nigel, yes, we are. I mean,
on.
some of this stuff is obviously trying to control traffic, trying to minimise the number of road traffic collisions, for example, because inevitably we've all been caught up in congestion where there's been some driver who either by accident or idiotic action has created a pile-up which subsequently knocks onto everybody else, and we want to keep the roads as moving as they possibly can. But saying that...
But human error will happen regardless whether you have cameras or not.
Oh, absolutely. But certainly in terms of those that may stack up behind that particular vehicle, obviously we're minimising it if people are at a more breakable or break distancey speeds.
Hence we have a sign that says...
True, yeah.
All right, I get that.
Having said that, though, things are moving into interesting dynamics, and we are moving into a somewhat dystopian future, which I think we have to be very, very cautious about. And although me as a security person will inevitably want to look at things which are going to help law enforcement, our good friends the security services just across the river here, in being able to detect and obviously gather that evidence for crime or for terrorism activities, there are things that all of us, everyday people, potentially could be subject to, unwillingly and unknowingly.
Well, that's my feeling on this. My feeling on this is people who are out committing knife crime or dealing in drugs, they couldn't give a damn about cameras.
Yeah, well, you mentioned certainly that is the case. And when we look at CCTV, which we originally used to as a sort of passive means of evidential recording, and a crime has taken place, the authorities then review that CCTV footage. Obviously, things are now IP cameras. These are going to servers in the sky. And it's also these other applications. And you touched on Huawei. Now, one of the biggest concerns is the vast majority of the cameras that are being used here in the United Kingdom quite often are purchased on a price band and it has to be price competitive. And the Chinese market have been incredibly clever about making sure that their cameras could be acquired at the lowest price point. Now, the concern is many of these companies are owned by the Chinese government.
And could it be they're selling these cameras at a loss just because they want a position in the market?
To a certain extent, but I am slightly more sort of suspicious in terms of the abilities that it affords to the Chinese government to be able to invade and intrude into our everyday lives unwittingly to us. And certainly the configuration of the cameras and the ability, good example, in one of the Italian airports where they had 140 cameras, there were 11,000 attempts by Chinese servers to penetrate those cameras and retrieve information every hour.
What can we do to wake people up to this? We get the odd newspaper article, the odd conversation on TV, such as this. What can we do to make people realise the extent to which we are being surveilled?
Well, I think, you know, our smartphones, we have to recognise our smartphones are giving away our position quite often. It's creating, with the help of algorithms, an understanding of each of our personalities, our likes, our dislikes, the things that obviously we want to go and visit or look at or enjoy. But saying that, there is these third-party cameras. We take a personal choice to carry those smartphones. You could carry an old Nokia if you so chose, but that doesn't exempt you from that wider surveillance. And if UK governments, and I've advised governments, I've advised private businesses and private individuals, that those cameras, they have to configure correctly to ensure that only those that have the permission to view them can view them. But facial recognition, there is a lot of very sophisticated AI that's being used now, Nigel.
Big brother, I don't like it. We'll get his. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and bringing us up to speed. Now, the Boris legacy. I said we discussed the Boris legacy. You know, is it a magnificent one of great triumph and victory, or is it a career that reached the very pinnacle? There was so much optimism and hope and has ended in total disaster. I wonder what the answer is. Well, Andrew Jimpson, of course, former sketch writer for The Telegraph and author of a book on the great Boris. Very good. Andrew, great to see you.
It's inscribed to Nigel, who did so much to prepare the way. For...
you know, it's funny that because... Thank you very much indeed. It's funny that because, actually, I got rid of Mrs May, not Boris.
Yes.
I got rid of Mrs May, and it opened the door for him, and
very polite of you.
And I wanted to get Brexit done, of course, absolutely. And in the general election, I realised, actually, if we stood in those 300 seats, if I went around the country and rubbished the Brexit deal, said it's a load of cobblers, actually, would have, the Lib Dems would have won dozens of seats. So I did all those things, which did help him get there.
Yes.
And I can't help but sit here and feel pretty angry about the way that he used the opportunity of being Prime Minister. And that we'll look back on this period as being a terrible waste.
Well, who would have done better? That's the question.
Well...
you're immediately implying a sort of perfect Prime Ministership.
No.
They're all there to take the blame in the end.
Look, he had COVID to deal with.
Yes.
I get that, and that was a big deal, although it sort of went on rather longer than perhaps it might have done. Obviously, Ukraine has taken up a lot of time over the course of the last few months. Yeah. I think my frustration is getting Brexit done wasn't just leaving. There was lots of other tidying up to do. They didn't do any of it.
It's not really tidying up, though. It's being a self-governing nation.
Well, being a self-governing nation gives you the ability...
And that's never actually... There's always danger in independence and in freedom, isn't there?
We haven't
We always find something to argue about, or some precipice that we're in danger of.
I mean, of course, you could argue that independence is actually about the right to mismanage our own lives.
Yes, and occasionally learn from mistakes. I don't know if you've ever learned from any of your mistakes.
Oh, very doubtful.
I'm not very good at it, mate.
Very doubtful. No, he didn't use the opportunity. Yeah. We haven't deregulated. We haven't lifted the burden off business. We pursued a loony energy policy. I mean, OK, you can argue net zero, which came in the last days of Theresa May as a target. You can argue it was in the manifesto, but the emphasis that he
The energy policy has been loony.
Build back Beaver. What the hell was that all about?
The energy policy has been loony, but it was loony in Germany too. So, which doesn't...
That doesn't help.
It doesn't help, no. But, I mean, the sheer unscrupulousness of German policy and deliberately making themselves...
I'm being very critical.
Yes.
Andrew, you sum up Boris's career.
Oh, the greatest well, I think of course, the difference between him and you is that he worked within an established party, and you very quickly went into opposition and spurred the established party into eventually doing what you thought was the right thing. But he's the greatest Conservative campaigner since Thatcher, an astonishing ability to connect with the wider public, and actually in a tradition of Tory Democrats, which goes back to Disraeli, and when the working class were first getting the vote in 1867, and Disraeli saw these angels in marble, he saw that many workers are very conservative. They believe in family, religion, the monarchy, the armed forces, all these things. And the liberals, the middle-class liberals, Gladstone, thought, well, these are our people. And then later on, Labour thought, these are our people. They took them for granted. And they subjected them to a lot of progressive nonsense. Now, you, of course, were always very old-fashioned. You were the city gent in your city gear. And you had old-fashioned recreations and everything. And this took the progressive establishment very much by surprise. They didn't understand it. And Boris also is in many ways an old-fashioned person.
No, I get that. I get that. I mean, overall, I suppose you have to say, despite the fact that tomorrow morning at 7:30 is going to be very hard for him to get up and say what he has to say in Downing Street, but he's been Mayor of London. He was re-elected as Mayor of London. He's reached the position of Foreign Secretary of Prime Ministership. What now? I mean, you've studied this man. You've worked with this man. What next?
Well, he has an astonishing resilience. He'll still, in a way, he'll still have a very high opinion of himself. He'll think that, the Tory party, this herd, as he called them, of Tory MPs,
wasn't very graceful.
And of course, there was an element of truth in that they did. Well, but in fact, they're not a herd; they're a tribe, and the tribe decides to murder its chief every so often. Yeah. And the tribe lost confidence, and had many reasons to lose confidence in Boris Johnson, and so out he went. But he will be looking to. There's a very obscure. You possibly not heard of him. I don't know if you did any of his works at Dulwich College, but there's this obscure playwright called William Shakespeare, and Boris is going to bring him before a wider public finish his book on that. He'll obviously give a great many speeches, and his gift for putting himself at the centre of any story, which he's had since he went as the Telegraph's correspondent to Brussels in 1989.
Oh, no, if he wants to do it,
he'll still be there.
Yeah, if he wants to do it, he can do it. He'll be in America and make money. A final thought. We know he's a great cheerleader. Fantastic cheerleader. Wave the pom-poms, be the PR man for London.
Yes.
Go out and spread optimism.
Yes.
Even if there isn't much backing it up.
Yes.
He can do all of that.
Yes.
Is he a leader?
Oh, I think he is in the sense of being prepared to risk his own skin. I mean, of course, some people thought he took too many risks, but he was bold, and he wasn't. And he was, of course, bold in his use of language. I mean, sometimes deliberatally in order to provoke his enemies into getting so angry that they couldn't work out how to think straight about how to beat him. But I think he unquestionably is a leader. In fact, it's difficult to see what other position in the team he could really occupy. He is. I played cricket with him once, and he definitely was the captain. we got thrashed because the other side had some chap who'd been captain of the West Indies who dented all our cars by hitting six. But Boris didn't give up. He came on to bowl himself. He took a wicket. Anyone else would have thought, well, the game's over, and he didn't. And he won't think the game's over now.
No, he won't. Andrew Jimson, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll get a very different view of the career of Boris Johnson. But for now, we're going to take a break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, Andrew Jimpson there, a big fan of Boris Johnson, says he will return. Well, Paul Connew, former editor of the Sunday Mirror, has also written a book about Boris Johnson, but I think takes a rather different view. So, Paul, I know you're a very strong Boris critic. Tell me why.
I don't know Boris that well, but I have encountered him over the years at various political, charity and other events. But my disillusion with Boris even dates back as far as when I was a senior exec on the News of the World, and one of my reporters was investigating his old Etonian chum Darius Guppy on a serious fraud and bogus robbery case, and Boris agreed to try to find the reporter's home address so that Guppy could have a couple of heavies go round and break a rib or...
And this is 30 years ago.
Yes, and break a rib or two. And Boris tried to get there. In the end, the attack never took place. Max Hastings, who was then, his editor, disciplined him in a mild way. But I wonder if Sir Max, now one of his harshest critics, if he'd fired him, would he have history have changed? I don't know, But Boris, to me, and in the book, which is Boris Johnson, Media Creation, Media Cloud, Media Casualty, with the question mark, which is the question mark's important, because I don't discount Boris returning, and Churchill was his hero, and you could say that Churchill was the ultimate comeback kid. And although we're already seeing certain newspapers almost lobbying for Boris to come back.
It's happening already.
Extraordinary.
It's happening already.
We're even hearing reports of a group of MPs, who must be balmy, trying to sort of see if they can move a no-confidence motion in Liz Truss to get Boris.
Well, I'm not sure I believe that.
No, I don't believe it. I believe that it's being talked about. But it will never actually come to fruition before the next election, anyway.
I mean, Paul, you've questioned his integrity, you've questioned his honesty, and you've been very consistent on this. But he became the Mayor of London. He won that. He held it for a second time. He won a big majority in a general election. He is quite a successful politician, isn't he?
Boris has something which Liz Truss is going to struggle with, and that Boris has charisma. But the charisma, which was, the reason he had a Teflon flak jacket for so long, is now shot full of holes. Partygate, Gropegate, Wallpapergate, they all conspired. The public do not believe anymore in Boris Johnson. The polls are showing that the general public, but of course the Conservative Party membership, representing less than half of 1% of the total electorate, are still in love with him. The polls were showing they'd still rather have Boris than either Sunak or Truss. But I did actually predict on another programme on this station on Friday night that the majority, the margin of victory would be nowhere near as big as the forecast. I said it'd be about 20 points. In fact, it was actually to be 15. And I think what happened was that as the campaign went on, Sunak did better. And the whisper is that the late votes tilted towards Sunak,
it's going to be
whereas the early votes were overwhelmingly for Liz Truss.
But very interesting, both you and Andrew Jimpson, different views on Boris Johnson, but both think he may return. Paul Connew, going to have to leave it there. Thank you as ever for joining us on GB News. Let's go to College Green and let's be joined by the Scarborough and Whitby Member of Parliament, Robert Goodwill. So, Robert, it's been a horrendous few months for your party, everyone fighting like rats in a sack. Is the civil war in the Conservative Party now over, in your opinion?
Yes, I think the Conservative Party are very good at getting back together because we realise that we need to win the next election, and although I was part of Rishi's team, I'm going to be pulling behind Liz and doing everything I can to make sure that she's successful. I hope that she can bring forward a team of all the talents with her new cabinet and new ministerial team. And I think we need to demonstrate to the country that we, in this particular situation, the crisis we're facing now across a whole variety of fronts, that we can actually demonstrate to the British people that we are the best people to take us through this difficult time.
But the truth is, Robert, during that campaign, some pretty tough words were said. And indeed, you know, basically Team Truss say that Rishi Sunak was a captive of Treasury orthodoxy, of global thinking. How on earth can these people who've been fighting against each other so much, how on earth can a parliamentary party that's just committed regicide against Boris Johnson, how on earth does it all come together again and pretend that it's happy families?
Well, I think the election in less than 2 years' time will concentrate our attention. And don't forget that, you know, when Rishi came up with the furlough scheme, that wasn't Treasury orthodoxy. That was really quite against the grain. And I think, you know, Rishi does have his own mind. He was certainly not a chancellor that I've heard accused of going along with Treasury orthodoxy. So, you know, I think that we really do need to, you know, get on the front foot. You know, Liz Truss, any one of the 5 people that put their names forward is going to be better than Keir Starmer as our next Prime Minister. And we need to make sure we can demonstrate that. And, you know, there will be no continuity Rishi campaign as far as I'm concerned. We will all be pulling behind Liz to make sure that we can get that historic election win in probably May or June 2024.
Right. Do you agree with me, Robert, as a final thought, that the Conservative Party, many people feel let down by it, it's consistently double digits behind in the polls. Do you agree with me that it's drinking in the last chance saloon in electoral terms?
Don't write us off, you know, and when you are in government, particularly when there's a crisis on, you know, you have to look back through history when, you know, the country's facing very tough challenges. The government has to take some tough decisions, and people respect a government that one understands the problem and then can take the necessary action. And this isn't just about people paying their energy bills, it's about, you know, access to gas for industry. I'm a farmer, I chair the EFRA committee. You know, we're really worried about getting fertiliser for the coming season. Without fertiliser, we can't produce food, we can't, you know, fill those supermarket shelves. So, you know, there are a number of issues, both domestically and internationally, with the situation in Ukraine, where I believe Liz will step up to the mark. She's probably the most experienced of the candidates. She was in a number of government departments, including DEFRA, so she'll understand those issues. So I'm optimistic that we can pull together, and I'm really looking forward to Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, when she can get on the front foot and show Keir Starmer that she means business.
Robert, we're all looking forward to PMQs on Wednesday, don't worry. And thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight from College Green.
No, thank you.
Well, to round off the 2 hours, David Maddox, political editor of the Express Online, joins me. I've had a mass of guests on tonight, and we've had people who think Boris's legacy is a good one or a bad one. Everybody seems to think that he might want to come back one day. Very difficult, isn't it, for Liz Truss? I mean, day one as Prime Minister tomorrow, and there's this gossip about Boris returning. It's very hard for her, isn't it?
I think it is and it isn't. I think, to be fair, she will just focus on what needs to be done, and there's a hell of a lot that needs to be done. I mean, not least overhauling that lead Labour have in the polls and sorting out people's energy bills, because if she doesn't do the second one, then they can kiss goodbye to government for quite a long time. But, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I did a story last night with Boris's supporters, the ones who've been signing this petition to have a vote on him. And they're saying, well, you know, the membership want Boris.
But this is insane. We've just been through a psychodrama in the Tory party. It's gone on and on and on and on and on. I mean, they must be mad, these people.
We've been through a 12-year psychodrama with the Tory party.
Well,
this is
actually, in a way, it's true.
You know, this is how many? This is their fourth leader in 6 years.
Yeah.
And you know, they seem to be treating the job of Prime Minister as their personal plaything, and I'm talking they, Tory MPs, not the Tory membership, and which is why I think actually there may be some changes coming along in their constitution. I mean, it's mind-boggling, even with the Partygate stuff, it is mind-boggling that a Prime Minister can win an 80-seat majority and in 3 years later be ditched.
Wow. I mean, he's blown it, hasn't he?
Well, he has, yes.
He's blown it. I mean, you know, all this talk of him coming back, I think, despite the fan club, I think there were too many out there disillusioned with him personally.
Yes.
What about your readers? I mean, your readers, you know, express one of the great Brexit supporting, well, in fact, to be honest, the only one really to begin with.
Yes.
That was on the side of Brexit. You know, big supporters of Boris. I know you switched as a paper, obviously, once the contest was on and you were behind Liz Truss. What do you think your readers make of Boris Johnson?
I think our readers still mostly love Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
And they see him, along with your good self, as a man who delivered Brexit.
Yeah.
And I thought something that Andrew was just saying to you was really quite important. You know, he's one of the few Conservative leaders, or leaders of any type, to make that connection from the middle class to the working class vote. And it's one of the reasons why he was hated so much by the establishment.
Oh, yes.
As was Disraeli, who Andrew was mentioning.
No, you made that point very, very well.
Yeah.
Very, very well. But you understand, I mean, I'm just so frustrated. I mean, Brexit wasn't just about leaving the EU, it was about change. It was about, hey, they've given us a voice, we've used our voice, you know, we now want more. We want change, and it didn't happen, did it?
Well, I thought there was something a very telling line in Liz Truss's acceptance speech today. She said, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And actually, the point I've been making on your show and others for a long time now is that Boris's problem wasn't Partygate. The problem was that he wasn't governing as a Conservative.
I agree.
High tax, high regulation, all the rest of it. I think we're going to see some changes with Liz Truss. People are saying continuity Boris, but actually I think we're seeing some
well,
big
it was
policy
interesting having
changes
Gerard
in mind.
Lyons in earlier saying, look, I'm not an official, but we know he's been there and around the scenes. It's going to be very interesting. PMQs on Wednesday. You know, big gladiatorial moment, but it's going to matter, isn't it?
It is actually, and she needs to come out sparkling, and she needs to come out fighting. She can't afford to do what she did in that first televised debate and just come out really flat and wait for the second one to find some life again. She's got to come out fighting. And let's face it, point I've made to you before, she's up against Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
And Keir Starmer still represents the best hope of a Conservative party.
Be lucky in your enemies.
Exactly.
We're done. It's over for the evening for me. It'll be Dan Wootton taking over in a few moments' time. I'm back here at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. First, though, let's get the all-important weather.
Nigel Farage, what a great show it was. Actually, just before you get to the weather, let me tell you what is coming up. So, Lee Anderson, the Tory MP, will be here on why the BBC seems so determined to destroy Liz Truss before she's even entered number 10. Then a whole load of political masterminds will be debating whether Liz Truss can be a competent MP, a great MP. Can she channel some of it in a Margaret Thatcher? Tory grandees David Malloy and Edwina Currie, former Conservative MP and barrister Jerry Hayes, ex-Conservative MEP David Campbell-Bannerman, he was backing Boris Johnson, of course, and the political commentator Emily Hewitson do battle on that in the clash. Stephen Glover, the Star Daily Mail columnist, is going to be here to reveal why it's actually immigration and the Channel migrant invasion, which is the most important thing for Liz Truss to sort out. It's all coming up. Big 2 hours of analysis ahead.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Tomorrow will bring another mixture of sunshine and showers, but probably more showers tomorrow compared to today. And again, there could be some thunderstorms too. This area of low pressure is driving our weather, and it's not moving very far very quickly. It will control our weather throughout this week. One line of heavy showers is drifting northwards at the moment. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place across parts of England and Wales. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time. You may get woken up overnight by a flash of lightning or a rumble of thunder once more. Those heavy showers drifting northwards into parts of Scotland by dawn. Behind, actually, many places becoming drier through the early hours. Quite a warm, humid night yet again. Tuesday will again be a mixture of sunshine and showers, many places starting dry, but showers becoming pretty widespread pretty quickly across Scotland and northern England. Again, some thunderstorms are possible, and then we'll see more heavy showers developing across parts of England and Wales during the day. Again, if you don't see the showers, and some will avoid them in the sunshine, feeling quite pleasant with temperatures in the high teens or low 20s. But more downpours